Long before the galaxy learned to fear humanity, it learned to pity them. Earth had entered the interstellar stage late, fragile, and indebted. Their first faster-than-light jump ended not in triumph, but in catastrophe. A navigation error tore their exploration fleet out of hyperspace inside a collapsing binary system. Hulls cracked, reactors failed, and the void claimed human lives in silence. The survivors drifted, powerless, waiting for extinction to finish what physics had begun. That was when the Kethri arrived. The Kethri were old by galactic standards, a mercantile civilization known more for profit than compassion. They pulled human ships from the wreckage, stabilized their reactors, and towed them to safety. No speeches were given. No alliances were formed. The Kethri simply issued a debt marker: resources, labor, and future cooperation to be paid when humanity was capable. Earth accepted without hesitation. In those early years, humans were small. Their ships were underpowered, their weapons crude, their presence in the galactic councils barely tolerated. They worked where others would not. They mined unstable stars, repaired decaying jump gates, and served as auxiliary crews on alien vessels too dangerous for native species. They paid their debts slowly, quietly, without complaint, and they remembered everything. Humanity learned the galaxy not through conquest, but through observation. They watched empires rise on cruelty and fall to arrogance. They studied wars fought for pride, not survival. They listened in council halls where ancient species debated the value of life as if it were a commodity. Humans spoke little, but recorded everything. While others saw weakness, humans refined themselves. Their ships grew sleeker, not larger. Their weapons grew smarter, not louder. Artificial intelligences were not chained, but partnered. Military doctrines were built around restraint, escalation control, and one unbreakable rule: never strike first, but never fail to finish what is started. Generations passed, the debt to the Kethri was paid in full. With interest. Resources delivered. Contracts fulfilled. Lives risked and sometimes lost. When the final marker was cleared, the Kethri archived the record and moved on, giving humanity little thought. They would come to regret that. The galaxy changed the day the Kethri sent a distress signal. Their core systems were burning. A coalition of expansionist war clans had decided the Kethri trade routes were too valuable to ignore. Worlds fell in weeks. Civilian convoys vanished. Defense fleets shattered against overwhelming numbers. The Kethri appealed to ancient allies first, none answered. Treaties dissolved under political convenience. Profit-minded neighbors calculated loss margins and chose silence. With extinction looming, the Kethri sent one final signal: not to empires, not to gods, to Earth. The message was simple: stripped of pride and politics. Acknowledgement of past aid. A reminder of a debt once owed. No demand. No expectation, just truth. On Earth, the signal was received in silence. Human councils convened. Archives were opened. Old footage played, burning human ships rescued by alien hands long gone. Names of the dead were read aloud. Not as justification. As remembrance. Humanity voted unanimously. When the human fleet arrived, it did not announce itself. Space around the Kethri system folded with surgical precision as human vessels emerged, not in a single overwhelming force, but in layered formations designed to control space itself. Enemy sensors malfunctioned. Targeting solutions unraveled. Communication arrays filled with echoes of their own commands, reflected back with subtle distortion. The war clans realized too late that they were no longer fighting prey, they were inside a demonstration. Human ships did not charge. They isolated. They severed supply lines, collapsed hyperspace corridors, and disabled flagships without catastrophic explosions. Each engagement was measured, deliberate, terrifying in its calm efficiency. Entire fleets were neutralized with minimal loss of life, their crews left drifting, alive, and forced to contemplate defeat. The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief. This was not conquest, this was repayment. when the final hostile vessel powered down, the human fleet held position. Aid ships moved in behind them, repairing Ketheri's cities, restoring orbital infrastructure, evacuating the wounded, friend and enemy alike. No territory was claimed. No tribute demanded, only one message was transmitted across every open channel: humanity remembers its debts, and it always pays them in full. The galaxy trembled, not at humanity's power alone, but at the realization that the species once dismissed as weak had grown into something far more dangerous, a people who never forget kindness, and never forgive betrayal. And among the stars, a quiet understanding spread like wildfire: if humans ever say they owe you nothing, you should be very afraid. The silence that followed humanity's intervention was heavier than the war itself. Across the liberated Ketheri systems, wreckage drifted in slow orbits, frozen reminders of how quickly certainty could collapse. The war clans that had come seeking plunder now sent surrender pings into the void, unsure if anyone would even answer. They had expected retaliation born of rage. What they had encountered instead was something colder, far more unsettling: precision guided by memory. Human ships did not linger to intimidate. They stayed because stability demanded it. Engineers deployed from vessels that looked more like moving cities than warships. They worked alongside Ketheri crews, repairing orbital habitats, restoring trade lanes, and recalibrating jump gates damaged during the invasion. Human medics treated wounded aliens with the same care they gave their own, documenting injuries, optimizing recovery protocols, and leaving behind medical systems that would outlast their presence. The galaxy noticed. Observers from distant empires replayed sensor data frame by frame, trying to understand how humanity had dismantled a superior numerical force without triggering system-wide devastation. Analysts failed to find patterns that fit conventional doctrine. Human fleets did not rely on brute force dominance. They relied on prediction, anticipating enemy decisions before those decisions were consciously made. It unsettled everyone, because it meant humans weren't reacting to threats anymore. They were navigating outcomes. Ketheri leadership, shaken and humbled, requested a formal audience. Not to renegotiate alliances. Not to demand protection. To ask a single question that echoed through their halls like a confession: why? The human response was brief and unembellished. Records were shared: ancient logs, rescue manifests, biometric data from dying human crews saved by Ketheri hands long ago. Not dramatized. Not weaponized. Simply presented as fact. You helped us when it cost you profit, we remember. That answer spread faster than any fleet ever could. Civilizations that had once dismissed humanity as opportunistic began re-evaluating their own histories. Debts long ignored resurfaced in archival databases. Acts of cruelty once justified as necessity were viewed under a new light. The galaxy had grown accustomed to power that forgot. Humanity represented power that archived, and that frightened them, because it meant no action was truly forgotten. No betrayal truly faded. And no kindness was ever wasted. Human fleets eventually withdrew from Ketheri space, leaving behind autonomous defense platforms keyed not to allegiance, but to behavior. Aggression would be met with containment. Aid would be met with cooperation. The system was impartial, incorruptible, and unmistakably human in philosophy. As the last human ships vanished into folded space, the Ketheri understood the truth far too late. They had not been rescued by saviors, they had been defended by accountants of morality. And across the galaxy, every civilization quietly began reviewing its past dealings with Earth, hoping, praying, that when humanity finally came to collect what was owed, it would be mercy they remembered. The reckoning did not arrive with alarms or armadas, it arrived as questions. Across the galaxy, dormant human embassies activated after decades of silence. Courteous messages were sent, phrased with diplomatic softness, requesting historical clarifications. Trade records. Rescue logs. Incident reports. Encounters long dismissed as insignificant were suddenly relevant. At first, most governments complied, amused by what they assumed was human nostalgia. That amusement did not last. Patterns emerged. Civilizations that had offered aid to early humanity, fuel in desperate moments, medical assistance after radiation storms, sanctuary during political exile, found themselves receiving unexpected advantages. Trade routes stabilized around their systems. Piracy vanished. Human research stations appeared nearby, sharing defensive data and economic modeling that elevated entire regions. Those who had exploited humanity found something else. Their financial networks experienced unexplained inefficiencies. Jump gate malfunctions increased just enough to cripple logistics. Supply chains became unreliable. No attacks occurred. No accusations were made. Yet every setback traced back, subtly and legally, to human patents, human infrastructure dependencies, or human-mediated arbitration systems. Humanity was not punishing, they were balancing. Galactic scholars struggled to categorize what was happening. It wasn't empire building. It wasn't vengeance. It was something far more unsettling, a civilization applying long-term moral accounting on a galactic scale. Humanity had waited until they could act without chaos. Until correction could occur without war, and now, the ledger was open. Some species tried to respond with fear, attempting to erase records of their past cruelty. It failed. Human archives were redundant, distributed across quantum-entangled vaults and memory sanctuaries protected by law, AI, and cultural taboo. History, once observed, could not be deleted. Other civilizations chose a different path. They reached out. Envoys arrived on Earth not with demands, but with apologies. Some were sincere. Others were calculated. Humans accepted both with the same calm neutrality. Reparations were negotiated. Cultural exchanges initiated. Debts restructured into cooperation instead of punishment. The galaxy slowly realized a terrifying truth. Humanity did not want submission, they wanted acknowledgement, because acknowledgement changed behavior. In quiet moments between negotiations, humans reflected on the risk they had taken. By becoming arbiters of consequence, they had made themselves visible. Power always attracted challenge. Somewhere beyond mapped space, rising civilizations were already watching, measuring humanity's reach, wondering how long before they could test it. Humanity prepared without theatrics, fleets trained not for domination, but for intervention. AI models simulated conflict centuries ahead. Education across human worlds emphasized memory, restraint, and responsibility. Children were taught that strength was meaningless if it erased the past instead of learning from it, and as the galaxy adjusted to this new equilibrium, one truth settled into collective consciousness: the age of forgotten debts was over, not because humans demanded it, but because everyone now knew. Humanity was patient enough to wait. The galaxy had never been this quiet. Systems once humming with commerce now listened. Ships waited in orbit without orders, fleets slowed their patrols, and empires paused long enough to notice subtle shifts. Humanity was moving, always moving, but never in ways that could be easily traced. It was a rhythm of observation, calculation, and unseen influence that rewrote expectations without firing a single shot. On distant colonies, sensors recorded anomalies too precise to be natural. Supply convoys rerouted themselves as if guided by invisible hands. Rogue warlords found their communications intercepted, not to attack, but to correct. The corrections were gentle, yet absolute. Contracts renegotiated. Starports repaired. Trade balanced. No weapon ever fired. No lives needlessly lost. Humanity had perfected the art of controlled consequence, yet their reach was more than tactical. It was cultural. Archives once hidden in quiet corners of human space were released, not to impress, but to instruct. Lessons of restraint, failure, survival, and mercy flowed across networks. Species that had once prided themselves on cunning now hesitated, calculating the cost of deceit against a species that remembered everything and waited. Even the most arrogant empires could not ignore the lesson. The humans did not enforce morality, they curated it. Entire sectors found themselves subtly stabilized, as though someone had rearranged the galaxy's chessboard while all the players were distracted. Factions that had feuded for centuries suddenly found common ground, not by coercion, but by the quiet influence of humanity's presence, and in the quietest corners of the galaxy, where ancient predators had lurked for eons. The humans were noticed. Not feared yet. Not worshipped. But observed. Their patience, their discipline, and their uncompromising sense of balance set a standard that the universe had never encountered. For the first time, civilizations understood a simple, terrifying fact: humanity would repay debts not with rage, not with conquest, but with inevitability. And inevitability, the galaxy learned, could be far more frightening than war. The galaxy was changing, almost imperceptibly at first. Trade networks realigned, not by treaties, but by influence. Minor conflicts dissipated when human fleets passed through nearby sectors, their presence alone enough to enforce a balance no one could openly define. Archival transmissions, once ignored as human vanity, now carried weight in political councils. Records of past kindnesses and betrayals became currency, subtle yet unbreakable, woven into the fabric of interstellar diplomacy. Civilizations that had once underestimated Earth began to reassess. Scholars debated the meaning of these shifts. Generals recalculated strategy not around firepower, but around probability. Economists noticed anomalies in galactic markets, slight but consistent patterns of fairness that defied self-interest. Even artificial intelligences designed to optimize conflict and efficiency began to report ineffable variables tied to human activity, as if the very concept of accountability had been coded into the universe. Meanwhile, human fleets expanded quietly, not for conquest, but for presence. They patrolled hyperspace corridors, repaired ancient jump gates, and maintained orbital systems that had long been abandoned. Every action was precise, every intervention measured. They never took what was not theirs, yet they ensured the galaxy operated under a new logic. Actions, whether honorable or deceitful, would not be forgotten. The ripple reached the most dangerous corners of known space. Predatory species that had thrived in silence discovered that human observers were already cataloging their behavior, recording patterns, anticipating moves. Fleets sent to strike or to conquer found themselves countered not with overwhelming force, but with interventions so subtle that they questioned whether humans were acting or merely observing the inevitable consequences of their own aggression. Even the galaxy's ancient custodians, entities that had existed since stars first ignited, began to take note. They had overseen civilizations rise and fall, pruning those who grew too fast or too reckless. Humanity was different. They grew, learned, and survived without domination. Their patience and capacity to remember made them unpredictable, unmanageable, and, in time, indispensable. On worlds once ravaged by war, humans helped rebuild. Civilizations learned cooperation through example, not coercion. Trade resumed, territories stabilized. And alliances formed that might never have existed without the quiet hand of humanity guiding without interference. And the galaxy, which had once dismissed humanity as a fledgling species, realized a terrifying truth: humanity did not need to conquer to command respect, they only needed to repay their debts, and in doing so, they had rewritten the rules of the universe. A new order was not declared. It had arrived quietly, carried on human patience, precision, and unyielding resolve, and in that stillness, every species understood: to owe humanity anything was to risk their own reckoning. The culmination of humanity's quiet revolution was not heralded by fanfare or battle. It came as a galaxy holding its breath. Civilizations that had once feuded for millennia found themselves coordinating without compulsion. Trade, diplomacy, and defense systems harmonized with a subtle efficiency no one could fully explain. Human fleets no longer moved merely to intervene, they became anchors of stability, their presence a reassurance that chaos could be managed, that survival was possible without tyranny. Ancient threats, long dormant in uncharted regions, shifted uneasily. Predators that had once stalked the edges of known space found their movements anticipated, their hunts disrupted by human foresight. Even artificial intelligences of vast empires recognized patterns that humans created. Patterns that favored survival and measured justice over dominance and exploitation. Humanity had not built empires, they had built a balance that could not be ignored. On countless worlds, humans taught without preaching, healed without expecting gratitude, and rebuilt without claiming ownership. Records of kindness, courage, and sacrifice were archived and shared, forming a living history that reminded every civilization, actions mattered, choices were remembered, and debts, however old, could never be forgotten. The galaxy, which had once assumed humans to be insignificant, trembled not at weapons, but at the inevitability of their influence. Every empire, every species, understood the quiet truth: humanity's power lay not in conquest, but in conscience. Their patience was endless. Their memory flawless. Their capacity to repay or punish absolute. In the deepest reaches of space, where light barely reached and stars were few, the universe itself seemed to pause. The ancient custodians, forces older than time, observed without interference. They had overseen countless civilizations rise and fall, yet even they recognized that humanity's method of reckoning was unlike anything they had encountered. A species that could repay debts, enforce accountability, and protect life without tyranny was not a threat to be destroyed, it was a standard to be noted, and so humanity continued, silently, steadily, shaping the galaxy not through domination, but through vigilance, because the galaxy had learned, finally, that when humans repay their debts, even the stars themselves must tremble.